to a special episode of How Long to Beat. You probably noticed by the title. This is a new little segment we're doing called New Game Plus, where we revisit a topic from a previous podcast that we feel like we didn't quite dive into as much as we'd like to. This is essentially a way for us to take a little bit of a break sometimes because we have busy lives. So here you go, and this is our pre-recorded conversation about 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. So to kick us off, Rick, I think you mentioned... So I'm just going to say, first off, the last time we talked about this game, I think I've cooled a little bit on my opinion of this game. Like,
come to your senses. Yes, I thought you would eventually.
Quite, but I was just, man, when I played this game, it was the worst week of this entire year. It was a literal hellscape outside. It was so fucking hot, and I was not in the right place to play this game at that point. But you said you wanted to talk about what our favorite and least favorite characters were. And personally, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. I in fact, just before we start, we're gonna be heavily spoiling. So you owe it to yourself to play this game before you listen to this. This recording's not going anywhere. So you go somewhere, go and play the game, and then come back, and we'll be here waiting.
Exactly. We will. It'll be here for you when you're done. I think my favorite character was probably Yuki Takamiya, the long black hair lady, because I think she was she was just kind of like the tough chick, but like she also seemed to have kind of personality, and like also I thought the fact that like she was searching for Natsuno was really interesting. Like it was like an interesting plot line, and like it had like internal motivations that were like a little more grounded for me. It's like, okay, we're trying to find someone, and then like the crazy stuff was still going on around her, but like I felt a little more like just invested in what was going on. Like I was like, oh, I know who Natsuno is, and I kind of know why. Well, I mean, you two are like best friends, but isn't it also implied that like she is Natsuno's mother in like the before times? Like she was her
original version. Yeah.
Her original version.
Yeah, so I thought that was like a neat connection, and then the idea that they grow up as best friends, it's like they're still sort of drawn to each other in that way. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I kind of wish they did a little more with it, but yeah, I really liked her quite a bit. I don't even... The rest were sort of blah for me, so I'm not really sure who like my least favorite is. I mean, maybe Goto, just because he's nothing. Like I like Goto, is interesting, but he's nothing. He's no one. You know what I mean? Like he's not even really a person. He's just kind of like a plot contrivance. Yeah.
You could say Fluffy. I would allow that. So I know you didn't like him one bit.
Oh yeah. Well.
The Fluffy was very interesting though.
I liked where they went with Fluffy stroke Q stroke Shiba.
Yeah, I thought that was
super interesting.
Yeah.
But by the way, I know Fluffy more as Chippo because that's the Japanese name that I keep hearing, and that's Takamura in the end.
Chippo. I also thought their little friend, Fuyusaka,
BJ.
Not BJ, sorry. Fuyusaka and Kisaragi's friend, is it Sawatari or something? Miwako.
Oh,
She annoyed me at first because like her English voice is a little like, but she's also kind of funny because I'm just like, there's this like poor AI construct who's just being like fucking pulled around by all these people. I just sort of was like, just kind of felt bad for that character.
That's fair. I liked Ogata's campaign the most. I liked the sort of Groundhog Day thing that they did with that, and especially because you only finished that route in the late game. There's some interesting revelations with the meta chips and some of the other stuff that ties into that. But I think my favorite character is probably Natsuno. I loved the whole thing with BJ, almost the ET sort of thing where she's hiding this little robot and also discovering what's going on in the Sentinels. I also really liked Sekigahara with the whole like this guy thought he was brought up in 1945 and seeing him have to adapt to everything. And then obviously the little thing, the rivalry between American hamburgers or whatever they called them and yakisoba.
Hamburger.
That was That's the one.
Yeah.
It's Hamburg steaks, is what they called them. That's the
It's
one.
Hamburg steaks and yakisoba pan.
Oh, fucking yakisoba.
Yes.
I
Maybe
still have
he's
to
my
taste
least
that.
favorite, actually. Fucking Christ. He's a yakko.
I also did quite like Megami, aka the Yakisoba Pan Angel.
Oh,
The
yeah.
yakisoba pan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my favorite.
What's
of
your
the
least
bunch
favorite, though, Rick?
Oh, I am sorry.
No, that's okay. I need you. Yeah, pick one.
I found Chihiro kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Is that what she's called? Like the young version, stroke really, really, really old version of Iori.
Yeah, that's Chihiro.
Oh,
Miura.
Chihiro.
Right? Yeah.
No, Keitaro
It's
Miura is
Moribura
the
Chihiro.
male character.
Well, she's called Chihiro Miura.
Oh, it's Chihiro Miura. Yes, sorry, yes.
Because
Yeah.
she's the
Oh,
young one is
yeah,
a Miura,
yeah.
right? Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
What about
yeah.
you, Paula?
For my favorite character, I think I have to go with Yuki because, first of all, she's an absolute queen, and I stand by her. But we stand. One of the things I enjoyed, like generally about the game, is how they do the different animations for each character of how they thinking, how they standing, how they walk. And there was something about Yuki's like really dignified walk that had this like air of confidence around her, and I really liked that. Not only that, but the whole thing, like she was trying to look for her friend. She had this internal conflict because she's a very proudful person, but she had to yield to the to the people that were like pretty much blackmailing her. Like if she doesn't do the thing, her friend will be no more. Like so, and her friend like kind of disappeared at one point, and she was like looking everywhere for her, and like that dichotomy of the character, like she feels like an ice queen, especially when she's interacting with Amiguchi. Like she's really cold to him, but to be fair, the guy is really annoying, especially at the start. And very pushy. But when it comes to Natsuno, you can feel that she really cares about her, and the genuine feeling that I see from her and the internal like teardown that she's going through makes the character really, really interesting in my eyes. Also, Natsuno with the whole VJ thing and she thinking it was aliens and all the ET stuff. I really enjoyed her story and how she was like one of the more energetic characters, like being thrown like for a loop. Like everyone was super fucking serious about everything, and Natsuno had this thing that she was going like to find the aliens and stuff, but still like didn't feel like
lean
quite
into
serious.
that more, you know? Like I agree with you. Like her like mission be like, oh, it must be the aliens. I was like, that's pretty adorable.
Yeah, it was pretty cute, and I think I said this like on the chat, but when she was like interacting with Miura, I genuinely like how they bounce off of each other, especially because Miura is like so much of a prude, especially because he was like he grew up like in old Japan, like during the World War. So this kind of like clash between the eras they were rose in and how they were like educated to interact with other people. I kind of wish that we saw a little bit more of that, because I don't know if it was on Miura's or in Hijiyama brought when they started like talking about the yakisoba pan and the hamburger steak. Like
one of
for
them.
a while, I actually forgot they were like from a different era. So I wish they used that a lot more than they did. So yeah, that's like from my favorite, and Ogata's Road was just very interesting. And at last, I have like the whole Groundhog Day thing. I kind of have like a disjoint in my brain because it's supposed to be seeing like the area that day, but it seems to have been like it has been modified to an extent. So I'm like, okay, you are like in this kind of time loop, but it isn't really a time loop because reasons. But you're looking into your memories, but how do you know what happened if memories didn't happen? So that point in particular was a little bit weird to me, but the overall feeling of being trapped in this thing and then having this other character rescue him from this perceived time loop kind of like added this layer of complexity of this already like convoluted world.
Okay, but what's your least favorite?
My least favorite, I don't want to say Goto because like even if he was like the encyclopedia-san, as I call him,
yes,
he still had something going on. Like he was like the
okay, yeah, but who's your least? You're dancing around.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's because okay. I'm still thinking if I like Jiro less or if I like Megumi less. Because Jiro feels like a very like piece of bread kind of character. Like is your average high school boy that doesn't really have a lot going on for him, but he becomes interesting as the story goes on. And the thing about Megumi that I don't like is how clingy she was to Jiro.
Right,
because Jiro Izumi is no more. But she still clings to that sliver of hope and that's why she pretty much did everything that Fluffy told her to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like her character is just about recovering the old Jiro and sticking to the past.
Yeah, I was
I am not sure the fun of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna agree with you. I was just a little bit confused, and like this could just be me not clocking it right, but it seemed to be the imply that Jiro Izumi saved Megumi in the real like their world thing, right? Like in when she was a child. And I was like, what's going on here? Because like Megumi seems to be like in love with Jiro, which I was like, huh? Like, did they have a relationship at that point? Because like I thought Jiro seemed to have something with Chihiro in that future time, but maybe not. But like, anyway, I was just like, but she was a child, wasn't she? Like, I'm like, what's going on?
Allow me to explain, because this is convoluted as fuck. Yeah. The Jiro Izumi of the spaceship that was like pretty much like playing, is the clone from the jail Jiro Izumi. It is like kind of like an illegal clone of him.
The general?
No, the Jiro Izumi, the one that rescued Megumi, or the one that took Megumi in.
Yeah.
That is a clone from the Izumi that was on jail. The 406, I think it was.
426?
426. Who is also Q, who's also Shiba, who's also Fluffy.
Yeah.
And it's that version of Jiro that has the thing with Morimura.
Yeah. The version of Jiro that rescued Megumi, that took Megumi in, these people that were in this spaceship were the ones to be cloned to give rise to the other humans. So actually Megumi is a clone from the original Megumi. And then you have the other world that was like created by the not the Sentinels, like the demons.
The demons.
Yeah. So what you're saying though is that
that's the Jiro Izumi that was there, lost his memories. His memories were erased because otherwise he would have been an empty shell of himself.
But hold on. What you're saying though is that the Juro Izumi who rescued him was an adult and fell in love with child
No.
Megumi.
No.
The
This
body
fucking
of
game.
the,
Okay, sorry, yeah.
It's the same Juro. So Izumi and Kurabe are the same person effectively. What happens is Izumi spends too long in the Sentinel defending the world that he and Megumi are in. Because of the nanomachines, that puts so much of a toll on his brain that it essentially fries it. So in an effort to save him, the identity of Juro Kurabe is constructed.
I'm sorry, but what about this future thing though? Like there's like this future thing where this like adult Juro saves Megumi. Like what the hell is that? Is that just randomness?
It's a different Juro. It's a different person.
It's a different person altogether. The Juro Izumi that lost his memories is a clone from that Juro.
This is one of the interesting things with the game because it plays with that and it does resolve all of them. But like, there's two shoes. There's technically two Tomies because you've got the digital version that's stuck in the satellite. There's three. There's three of Iori because there's the Morimura version.
The Chihiro version
and the Chihiro version. And because initially you don't realize that there's multiple people, it messes you around because it's like, well, how can they do this and this? And that's part of the intrigue. And the way that it pulls it together, assuming that it takes you all the way, which clearly it didn't for you because you're suffering from heat.
That's not the only reason, but okay. let's. I'm
going to blame it primarily.
This is a good segue into mechanical cohesion then, like talking about the cohesiveness of the game, because one thing that I feel was a bit of a weakness for the game is that I didn't really feel like the tactics game and the narrative segments like connected very, very well, or as well as I kind of would have liked, because part of the issue is like, it sort of felt like, they gate off progress, right? You have to complete certain things before you can keep moving on, which personally, I understand it from like a sort of storytelling and sort of like just like logistics standpoint, probably for the team, but I'm also a little bit like, you cowards, just let me have it all, but I also get it, you know what I mean? Like I get it, like, but I kind of wish a game would just let you go for it.
The narrative, it's impressive that it works as is in the way that the product comes together. The only reason it works at all is because they make sure that certain things can't happen out of sequence. Like there's a few beats that you have to hit, and some of those are tied into the combat. I do think I wouldn't necessarily call them cowards, but I think it's a fair criticism that they didn't back themselves enough in terms of the combat gameplay and being like, this is what we've done and we're proud of it. Yeah. Because it's good, but they skewed it too easily, and they made it too easy to sort of box away as a player. And I sort of wish that they'd gone for that a bit more. It makes sense narratively, albeit only really at the end where you sort of see where both sides were going. And I think that's a fair criticism of the game, albeit not one that I found particularly bothersome.
Yeah, I think the combat will bother you more if you didn't like do a lot of it before you have to do it. So one thing they could have gone with is like get the story progress a little bit like in smaller sections. So at least you have to do some amount of combat like during the story, or like in the prologue. Like in the prologue, I feel like it was better done in terms of you have to mix things up because that's the prologue. The prologue wants you to do that.
Yeah. I agree with you that prologue, but I also think it's kind of a mechanical cheat to just kind of be like, oh, it's locked, you have to go play this. Do you know what I mean? Like I think I sort of, it's like, it's this balancing thing that it's not an enviable position, we'll put it this way, where they were in for like figuring this out. But I do think that it's like, again, if you were to try something like this again, really making it seem like it's necessary. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you want to do it, where it's like, I need to go fight these battles, or I have to go do this thing, and like I want to. Whereas right now, like you're saying, I feel like even if you checkpointed the story more, it would just feel still like, oh fuck, I gotta go do the fucking thing again, right?
And I think it'd be more bothersome if it interrupted you more. I think that would be an issue.
Yeah,
I'm also
right.
atypical. I actually played the combat until I couldn't, and then went back to the story, rather than the other way around, which I gather is how you both played it.
I was sort of mixed a little.
Yeah, actually, like went through the like 3 to 4 chapters of the story, and then like went to the combat until like it was like, okay, time for the story again.
I think what could have been interesting, I'm not sure if I would have necessarily liked it more or less, and I don't know how you necessarily quite fit it with the narrative, but if you'd had, instead of a gate, some kind of like threat meter, almost like you have in the newer XComs that Firaxis did, and you have to engage in battles so often to keep that threat down. Obviously, because of the way that the narrative plays out, you could never sort of completely bring it down. But I think that might give it a bit more of the urgency that you're sort of looking for, Alex, and also lend a bit more to the choice of when to engage in the combat from the player POV. That could be cool. That's a nice thought experiment.
Yeah. I think this is probably a bad example, but I'm thinking like Persona 4 or Persona 3, where you have like the social thing that is kind of like optional, but it helps you in some way on the other part of the game. I don't know how you do it like the other way around, but for example, in Persona 4, you have to have beaten the dungeon by a certain date, or otherwise something happens. So I think that would like go back to the gate for gating purposes only.
Yeah, and
or the meter effectively does that because it's by a certain percentage rather than a certain date, and because the narrative's so much stricter, it's going to play out in a pretty predictable way anyway. There's only so many story segments you can play, and you can't exactly fail them.
Yeah, and like I have to admit, the percentage is like a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways, you know, like having those percentage bars, because you're just kind of like, holy shit, how much more? Like you see that there, and like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of weird, and like I appreciate it being there, but then I'm also like, at times I go like, I have this much left, oh no. But then I also realize that I often do this with games anyway. Like I'll look up like how many stages,
how long to beat,
how long to beat, right? So, you know, I don't know if I want to be like, ugh, I don't like that, because I'm like, I don't know, maybe I do, but like sometimes it's like a little bit of, I don't know, it made me feel a little bit like I was going through a checklist, a little too much personally, like with some of the narrative stuff. Like it's just like, oh, I got to get this part and this part and this part, just too bad. And I don't know, just the piecemeal approach to it. Like I talk about the like thing where it's like, it's sort of, you know, you're fettered out like little pieces is interesting. I just, like, we've sort of talked about this a little bit. I felt like some of them just weren't really as interesting, and so they kind of like, and not even in the sense like, because I don't want to come across as saying like not interesting is like there's not enough happening, and it's like, no, it's just there often wasn't enough character motivations, right? Because there's so much happening. Yeah, like you're saying. It's just sometimes it's like, for instance, Hijiyama is one where it's like, well, he's just going to eat some food, and he doesn't seem to have much motivations at all, really, except to try and find you know, his love interest there. What's his name? Is it Ogata?
No, it's
no.
Okino.
Okino, yeah. Okino. Yeah. That was it. He's just kind of like, his whole like, what's his mission? What's his like driving goal? And it's like, where Okino go? You know? And I'm like, that's not much of a character, you know?
But I also like that by contrast, because then you have Megumi who's like, I have to save this guy by like betraying most of my friends. Or you have like Ogata who's like, I have to save us and break out of this time loop. And I think there's a utility to having stakes are a little bit lower and giving it some of that contrast. And I think that's one of the pros of that approach, because there's so many different threads. There's such a satisfaction in playing a little bit of Juro's story, and then you find out a little bit about Ryoko and the fact that she's taking the same pills, and then you play a bit of Ryoko's story, and now you're learning that Goto's up to no good in one way or another, and just the way that it sort of takes you around all these characters in such a path, and the way that that's so unique to you in the way that you decide to play through those different stories.
But I think the way you play the different stories also affect how much you enjoy the game.
Maybe.
Go ahead, Alex.
No, go ahead, Paula. I think you're on to something here. Yeah.
If you're like only centering like on like a single character, like you're gonna get a different experience as if you start like following like the breadcrumbs that the game starts leaving you. Because I feel if you separate like the experiences too much, then you'll forget of a plot point that happened on one road and why is it important in the other. Because like especially, and in case anyone is still here and don't want to be spoiled, like get out of here. But in the case of Jiro, like I think the best part of that route was when you notice that your friend, that Jiro's friend, only Jiro can see him, and then if you go immediately after to the Shu route, you see that Jiro is talking to himself most of the time. But if I went and play another route like in between, I think the impact of it would have been lessened.
Yeah, and that's probably fair, but to an extent that's an inevitability when you're playing with so many different pieces of string. And to the game's credit, the ability to go back and watch certain scenes, just how comprehensive the index section is that lists all the different aspects of the game, and the way that unfurls with the narrative, it's no mean feat to coordinate that in such a way that it works properly across everything that the game has to offer. And I almost felt like a bit of a detective, because there were certainly parts where I got to something, it's like, hang on, I know that's important for something else, or I felt like I'd heard something that was relevant, but the gap had sort of opened up in my head, and being able to go back in the index and put that piece together for myself, there was something really engaging about that in addition to playing the game, as it were.
Honestly, I was having like this mental corkboard with all these things like tying together.
Exactly, yeah.
What were you gonna say, Alex?
Yeah, well, I was just saying, like, because I understand that. I think the problem is that, like, for me at least, I just there were just like too many MacGuffins, in the sense of like, I love sci-fi, I do, but it just got a little. It felt like a little too much. There was just like too much going on, Like it's enough to try and make a statement on AI, to make a statement on androids, to make a statement on like all these like colonization, like all this stuff, and then like to do all of it, a little convoluted for me. So like the detective things, I think the issue is that if you buy in on it, I think you're right. Yeah, you can start to feel like a detective and you're kind of piecing it together. But like, I think if it bucks you off and you're just a little bit like, not interested, then it just kind of turns into this slog of like, okay, what are we talking about now? Oh, clones too? Who'd have thought? Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like whenever they would introduce a new thing, I was just like, oh my God, yeah, of course there's this as well. It's like a nano machines and this and that, and you're like in the viruses and now the AI are in here. And you're like, oh, okay.
They did interesting stuff with the nano machines though. It wasn't just like everything's the nano machines. There was like a specific rule set to how they operate, and that fed through consistently. And I feel like it's handled well. Certainly better than most things where nano machines become involved in media, because I feel like they really are like a Deus Ex Machina almost all of the time. And they had a significant role to play in the way that the story pans out, but I never felt like it devolved into that.
Yeah. Well, the nanomachines itself weren't like a huge issue. It's just like there was just so much around it that like, you know what I mean? Like I kind of wish maybe they had focused on like one or two of these things and like really went in depth with them, because to me it sort of felt like a cursory glance at a lot of sci-fi concepts, without ever really kind of piercing the heart of these things and like really investigating them, which is fair considering that they're doing such a different style of narrative. So maybe they were overwhelmed in the first place. But yeah, I just sort of like, you know what I mean? That was kind of the thing where I went like, we're touching on interesting things, but I'm wishing we were going a little deeper into these concepts, or even just allowing to see how that actually affects a person. You know, like that was part of my complaints, is that sometimes the characters, like you mentioned, sort of felt like the plot was happening to them, and I didn't know who they were that much, and I was sort of missing a little bit of this, like, how would this affect you though? And then some do
so
that,
you'd have almost preferred it if there'd been like 8 Sentinels, for example.
Maybe, yeah, like a few less. Pare back a couple of the ideas a little bit, and like just ground it a little bit more. Like, and that's just my personal taste. Like, I'm a little more interested in like a slightly more grounded sci-fi. I mean, when I think about examples, it's what's that? Oh no, what's that show? Amazon saved it on.
Which one?
I'll remember in a second, and I'll let you know. But yeah, that's kind of where I am. Oh, The Expanse. That's it. Like The Expanse is a great example of something that takes like some sci-fi concepts, but it sort of grounds them a little bit more, and you learn a little more about the characters themselves. And that's just my personal taste, you know. But if you like grandiose shit, this game's got it for you.
Yeah,
spades.
Other thing that I mentioned while playing this game is that it felt a little bit like what the Science Adventure series, you know, like Chaos Head, Steins Gate, and Erotic Notes is supposed to be doing. Like, for, I don't know if they're doing like a grand finale, but there were like talks about like having like all of the characters from, or at least all the concepts for the series, like doing them all together or something like that. At some point when I was playing 13 Sentinels, I was like, wait a second, like this was before like I discredited like the time travel theory, because it was like, hey, it has robots, it has time travel, and I think it has like this perception thing that you're like seeing things that aren't really there. And those are elements from the science adventures that had been explored individually, one on each game, alongside with AI and some other stuff. So at that point, there was so much going on with the world of this game that was like a red flag saying this is not what is happening to some extent.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that as a tangent is a problem with media in general. Like, I feel like our generation is so savvy with media that you sort of dig yourself into a hole where all the tropes have been done and all the inversions of those tropes have been inverted. So often you're in a situation where you can see the ways that it can go and you can't be surprised anymore. Like, we were watching some rubbish TV, like comedy murder mystery thing the other week, and there was a guy who was acting incredibly suspicious, and you know immediately like he's too suspicious to actually be the one who's done it.
Yeah,
and that sort of kneecaps it as a thing. And it's sort of interesting hearing you say that and sort of interface with that thing that I've noticed with other media generally.
Well, that's, I mean, yeah, not to bring it onto TV, but like I watched Mayor of Easttown a while back, and it's like one of those murder mystery shows, and that was actually a show that did it extremely well. And the fact that if you really thought intensely, you maybe could have figured it out, but it wasn't obvious at all because they had 2 separate crimes going on throughout it. But that's what they did. They limited it to two mysteries. And then it was character stuff. That was the rest of it. It was like really focusing on the character. And I think like what you're saying is kind of correct there, is that like plot lines themselves are not necessarily all that interesting anymore. You know, like you admit we've seen most plot lines, but what do we grab onto? We grab onto the people. We grab onto their conflicts with one another. We grab onto who they are and how they navigate these worlds. And I think that's something that 13 Sentinels is just missing a little bit. And again, this is bleed into another New Game Plus we'll be doing in a little while, is part of the thing with like storytelling in general in games at the moment, is that like I just sort of feel like that character interpersonal stuff is just not really there yet, or we just haven't really figured out like how do we do it well in a game, you know? Like what's the best way of making that happen? And this was an example where there are some examples though where they do it well in this game. Like I said, I think the Yuki stuff is interesting, and I think there's actually some like good interpersonal shit going on there. But yeah, overall, I think it maybe leans too heavily onto its plot, which then sort of allows you to distance yourself a little bit from its characters. I don't know. What do you guys think?
One of the things that I was thinking is how little, like from the characters before everything starts happening, in the sense of we already know that Q was really like just an illusion just to Judo to some extent. So at some point I have to start asking, how did Judo and Shu start hanging out? Why is Judo going to his place to play video games besides, well, having Q telling him to? Which, by the way, once you realize Q is never the one talking with Amiguchi, it just went like, oh, I see what you did there. But that aside, like...
It's the I see dead people thing.
Yeah, like the thing is that you have these characters with a life, but you also know that things can be fed to them, like via the VHS tapes that Jiro and Amiguchi watch, or even like just seeing stuff because the world itself was an illusion. So by that standards, like, did this character like really know each other like before everything went to shit? Like, in the sense that I think Natsuno talk about like her memories like with her parents and with Yuki at some point, or how Judo and her grandmother were like and Judo's grandma and her were neighbors, but there's this disconnect with most of the characters and what their life used to be that versus what their life is now.
Because isn't the implication that it's implanted memories?
Exactly, that's the thing. Some of it, like, but how much of it is implanted memories? Because at this point, you might as well say this whole game is a lie if it's implanted memories.
It's also worth remembering that it's not like these are 13 friends that happen to come together. It's like 13 people who lived in the same shared universes with all these AIs, and it just happens to be that these are the ones who are real people. I mean, Miwa-chan's a great example of that, because it's like she's a core part of the friendship group of Tomi and Iori, even though she's an AI, and that sort of splits between.
I'll be honest.
Yeah, maybe they could have gone into more and explained it, but I think that there's something to be said for not explaining every single little thing about your narrative. There's some things that you can leave to inference or interpretation or whatever else, and that's fine.
That's fine, but there's like a level of depth that I'm missing, and that I feel would have rounded out the characters more. Like, it's okay if they don't know, like, everyone knows each other, like, from the very start, but like, I kind of got a glimpse of what A Pass was, and that was like part of the story. But what's the deal with Goto? Like, what was he like before this shit? Or like,
especially because this is
as sick as it sounds, I would have actually know a little bit more like about Judo and Izumi and Megumi like before everything happened, because then maybe you could see like why Megumi was so hung up with the guy. Like, if I didn't see like a genuine connection between these two. And I only see Megumi just arriving to Juro's life and pretty much harassing him. I'm not gonna like the character.
Yeah. It's kind of hard because like this is a game that's based around 13 characters, right? Protagonists.
Yeah.
And yet there's clearly more love paid to certain characters than others, right? Like your thing with Goto. And
yeah.
It's
and that happens a lot, especially like in character-centric games.
Yeah. It's kind of
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's almost more a narrative piece as a collective. Like, obviously, there's 13 protagonists, and it's indisputable that some get slightly more attention and care than others. I think that's inevitable when you're juggling that many balls. But it's more about the overarching plot than it is about any singular character within it. And I understand why you might sort of come into it and come out of it with the impression that you would have liked more from those. But I think that's not quite what Vanillaware were aiming for with this, for better or for worse, whether that speaks to your taste or not.
And I think
that is fair. That is totally fair. But when you have like so much to work with, when you don't go like in depth, like in many aspects, like you still feel that there's something missing. Like not only there were like these 13 characters, but also the original 13 characters.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of the mystery too. Like even their original self, some did get more love than others.
Yeah, for sure. Well, some are more relevant to that aspect of the story than others.
That is
like Shinonome in her like 2189 incarnation only exists to be jilted by Amaguchi and was it no
Ida?
Yes. Ida, that's the one. And as a result, like do the sabotage that she does that kicks off the whole narrative. Who she is as a person isn't like it would be nice to know. It would be nice to know loads of things, but it isn't necessarily relevant to the overarching narrative that they're trying to tell. And so it's kind of understandable that they don't give her that much attention in that space.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what makes me sort of sad, though. It's like if you're calling your game 13 Sentinels, it's like, you know what I mean? Like the focus is on them, right?
And we spent all the time talking about the people, not the robots. Shake my head.
Exactly, right? But that's the thing. We're so focused on the people, you know? Like it's like that's who matter. It's the Sentinel pilots. And it's like I get what you're saying about the overarching narrative, but like you already enter into this game thinking I'm going to learn about 13 people, you know? And I'm going to learn about them in this interesting thing. And so it's like, yeah. I was disappointed.
To be fair, like the state of the world, like itself, before and after, everything was known through the people. So knowing more like about the people intrinsically means knowing more about the world they came from. And that would have even helped the overall narrative to some extent because, Jiro Izumi is an illegal clone. You know that shit is happening and the world is fucked, right? Like, before everything starts happening. You also know about the nanomachines, and I think there was like a patent or design thing that came out before it has to be, and the nanomachines end up being like the end of the world to some extent, and the nanomachine virus is what ended up affecting everyone.
Yeah.
So even like knowing more, like knowing these little details about how the world was, just made even like the present day even more interesting because like these characters are clones from other characters that are where they went through shit.
Yeah.
But I think they don't linger enough on some little aspects of it to really totally nail the overall like concept of the world. And on that note, like how the game wrapped up, like it felt like it was like building up for a while, and then the conclusion of the short, the ending of the story, like this happened too fast. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't say I felt that myself, but
I don't know if I felt that particular, but I did sort of feel like when it ended, I was like, oh, okay, that's that, I guess. I was like, oh, we got new Adam and Eve here. All right, Jiro and Megumi doing their thing, but yeah.
Clearly, it speaks to me in a way that it doesn't speak to you two, and that's absolutely fine.
Oh,
What we can all agree on is the game is fucking gorgeous.
Yes, that I can
It
agree
is
on.
gorgeous.
I would like to see more visual novels in this sort of 2D like watercolor style. I was like, that was, it was never not gorgeous. The tactical part was hideous, but that's only, but that's only because it was just like neon. It's just like, oh, things are exploding. But man, that visual
It was
novel,
a different look for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it was a look that I bet would have looked real fucking nice on about a 4-inch OLED display.
I wonder what platform that could have been that it might have one day released on.
Yeah, right. God, it would have looked good on that. I know. On a big screen TV, you're just like, what is happening? Yeah,
like, I wanted to. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that Rick doesn't think I hate the game, because I actually don't. And the reason I'm like, so like this could have been so much more is because I enjoy it so much. Like, because I enjoy it, I wanted to see more. That's the thing.
I know where you're both coming from, because I've been exactly there. When you've got like an 8 out of 10,
yeah,
and you feel like you can see exactly where those 2 points were lost. And we do it every week with one game or another. And you end up just spending so much time talking about where it dropped the 20 that you forget to sort of praise and enjoy and appreciate the 80, even though you do when it comes to actually talking about it. You're just like, I wish they'd done this and this and this, and then it would have been perfect, without saying, but it's still great.
Yeah.
It was perfect, and you're both wrong. But
there you go.
It was still great, and I still sent a lot of message at, was it like 4 or 5 a.m.?
Oh, you sent tons, yeah. It was the whole redacted document on Discord.
It was a lot of fun. It just filtered a couple of things for me.
Yeah. Visually and like audio, I thought was good too. Music was like fine. It wasn't anything like, whoa, but it also wasn't like bad.
How fucking dare you?
It was fine. I don't know.
Oh, it's phenomenal. The soundtrack is incredible. I have it on the regular.
Though, listen, I have to say, when they're fighting in the Sentinels and then future Kisaragi starts singing, I literally burst out laughing. I was like, this is the corniest thing I've ever seen. But which is fine, because listen, this is coming from the guy who loves Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is stupid. So like, I'm fine with that sometimes, but it was a little silly. I thought the voice acting was really good. I thought that was fantastic. And I mean, I'm sure it was excellent at Japanese as well, but like the English voice acting was like, it was really, really good. I skipped a lot of it, but it was really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like, fun fact, but the girl from Shin Megami Tensei 5 has the same voice actor than Shinonome.
Oh.
Interesting.
Like Japanese or English?
Japanese. And actually that one is like that voice actor I stand, because there's so many games and so much anime that I watch. It's like, oh, she's here too, and she's fantastic, because the range of voice acting that she has is crazy. That is not here out there. Sorry.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but we certainly went through the ringer on this one. Do we want to wrap up? Do we have any sort of concluding thoughts about 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim?
I just want to reiterate, go and find the soundtrack, even if you don't play the game. The soundtrack is chef kiss. Especially the intro track, and there's which battle music is it? It's Valine, Valine. That's just 6 minutes of like aggressive battle strings, and it just works.
Yeah. It didn't really stick with me. Like, I can't remember any of it off the top of my head, but like, it wasn't something when I was playing that I was like, ew. Like, I was like, oh, this is good. It just didn't impact me quite as much.
You too, if I say that the music, like the singer, like singing at the final battle is corny, but I fucking love it. Like,
I took it.
The moment that theme started, like, the song is forget the context, but the song itself, like,
the song's good.
Chills. So I find the moment I was like battling with that, and on the background.
You just gotta understand where I was at that moment, because like I'd been playing this for so long and I was like, this game's just ridiculous, and then this happens and I was like, this is like this, you know what I mean? I was like, this would never ever happen, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those, well, I mean, I can't even
none
say
of
that.
it would
it's a
ever,
crazy
ever
thing.
happen,
Yeah, nothing
would
would
it?
happen, but it's just like, it's at that point where you're like, I was just like, I just laughed. I was like, this is so silly. And I was like, whatever, it's fine. I'll just listen to this bop of a song and we'll just go through it. Nice. Yeah, I think I would recommend this game for people to try. But just with the caveat that it's like, if it doesn't grip you by like the time you've completed even like the first of the tactical like wave stuff, just you bounce off, you know, like, because like you're gonna know pretty quick if this game is like for you, I think, because like I realized pretty quickly in that I was like, shit, I don't think this narrative's bit me, and it's just such a big narrative that like, yeah, just
think like by the time you're by the time you're like starting like to pick the stories you want to follow, if that didn't suit you, then you're not gonna have a good time, because that's the game pretty much.
Yeah, but if you're into it,
once you've played the prologue, you basically know what you're in for. That's fair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd even say give it a little more than just the prologue, right? It's like a little, you know, like, because it does sort of open up in interesting ways after that. But yeah. Anyway, that's our first New Game Plus on 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. We're going to be doing these every once in a while where we're just going to tackle something that we talked about before. The next one you'll probably hear is going to be about storytelling in video games.
And boy, do we have lots of thoughts on that.
Yeah, we do. We got lots. I mean, this whole thing was like kind of a prologue to storytelling in video games. But you know, I still want to say this is an interesting case study on that. So put it on that point. But anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week with our regular programming. Toodaloo.
Bye.
Take it easy and go play fucking 13 Sentinels, please.